It's season 2 of Sell Me This Pro. I'm calling it season 2 because I feel like between the player breaks, we take a break. So we might as well just have seasons now. There's no real relevance to it, but here we are. B-Dog is back. And if you're new to the channel and you have no idea what this is, basically, B-Dog is the genius of Tier 2. He knows all the shit that's going on. And he basically will come on here and we'll talk about a particular player and he will sell them to us. If we were investing in them, if they were like penny stocks, if he thinks we can make a little bit of cash down the line, that's what he does. And he gives us a little bit of insight into who the player is and why you should be looking at them. B-Dog, did you have a good December break?
Yeah, it was lovely, to be honest with you. Like, having time off is a luxury sometimes in this profession because the thing is, the level is so high when it comes to broadcast talent that you have to consistently be working hard to get better. So I feel like the proving grounds are definitely online and tier 2. So it was nice to have a little bit of a time off. It was nice to spend time with family. But we're back now and we're locked in, ready to go for another year.
I feel like a lot of people only watch Tier 1 CS, right? They don't pay attention to Tier 2. But if you did pay attention to Tier 2, you would know that there are games going all day, every day, at all hours. And B-Dog is one of those guys that is commentating on them. You were solo casting like last week on some of this stuff. I mean, you are like, you just never leave that room, right? That you're just completely locked into commentating all day, every day.
Yeah, it's just me and the fish, really. And I guess that, you just kind of talk into the void almost, into the microphone, and people listen, or sometimes they watch on mute, but that's also fine. Look, the point is we're enjoying Counter-Strike, right? So, yeah, I mean, CCT has got 4 best of 3s on like every day. You've also got Yala, you've also got European Pro League, you've also got the other tournaments that just pop up. There's for the players, even like it's not just for us as well. It's like the players. Sometimes they're playing like 2-3 officials a day. Like, it's every day. It's ridiculous how much tier 2 Counter Strike there is. So yeah, it's cool because obviously with VRS we still don't know how that's gonna figure things out and pave the way. But what it does mean, and what we have already seen, is tier 1 teams signing tier 2 cores that have got VRS points to get them into events early. And then we're going to probably see more tier 2 teams gather points because they're playing so much damn Counter-Strike, and then putting them into tier 1 events as well. So the merge should be a lot more familiar rather than kind of coming through and only seeing these teams at majors.
Okay, so a little bit of a teaser here. If you want to know more about you mentioned it there, some of the ranking points, the drama in tier 2, because there's been some instances where these teams are playing all these officials, and then they find out halfway through that it's no longer going to be sanctioned by Valve. Others turn down events to find out they're NASA. Anyway, if you want to know more about that, there is a Feed the Trolls episode coming up with threats from NIP. He is their general manager. He's going to talk to us about it. It's a banger. I've actually recorded it already, and now I'm just teasing to it because you'll only see it in a couple of days, because I ain't editing on the weekend. There we go. I said it. Now let's focus in though. You mentioned there about teams picking up cores. I hate this so much. I'm just going to say it now. I absolutely hate that this is where we're at. I love the idea of, a coach sitting down and putting together the best pieces to make what they think will be the perfect puzzle, like what NIP's done. I think that the current lineup with Snappy at the helm looks really impressive. I love that building of a team and then sending them out there. But obviously, you don't want to do that because there's a chance that you then have to grind through all these online qualifiers, and that's really tough. So what we saw a lot of teams doing, and the most notable one was obviously Falcons, is going, okay, let's just take a core. We'll just pay for someone else's core so that we can get a particular position. And with that core, we can get the invites that we need, and hopefully it goes well. And of course, Falcons did it to Heroic. So this was a team that we saw last year at the Shanghai Major, looked really freaking good. I was so excited about what to expect from them. And then boom, it disappears. This is like the story of Heroic. They had so much bad luck last year that it felt fitting that it ended that way. And then they ran off and they picked up a team, B-Dog, which I think if you looked on the internet, everyone kind of went, what the hell is this? But you were familiar with a lot of these players.
Yeah. I guess we'll talk about the core first. It's probably fitting because
the other stuff, foundation.
The other stuff's really interesting. I don't really have all the answers to it, but I do know about the core of Heroic, and obviously it's the SANGAL guys that have come over. We did an episode in season 1 on LNZ and spoke a bit about SANGAL and how LNZ's play style and the way that they've got these really aggressive riflers, it mixes in a really nice blend to the team. They had Orpa Same, as I now learned that's how you pronounce his name, from Pro League, and not Same, but you're familiar with that? Polish Orpa. He's now playing on ESC. Anyway, he's over there. We're focusing here. And they picked up SunPayus, which I think's incredible. I think that really helps that team. But you got the core of xFloud, Youngster, LNZ. They were tearing up tier 2. They were winning a lot of tournaments. They won Challenger League. They went to Pro League. They beat FaZe in that opening best of 3 as well. And people started to take attention. And I actually think it's really cool that they've got the opportunity to go together, because I understand the argument of coaches being able to sit down, pick and choose players. At the same time, the fact that you can lift a core and you feel like you have to lift a core actually just gives experience to a broader sense for tier 2 in the future. Because say Heroic, they gain these VRS points and they want to make changes down the line. It looks like they do with some of the subs that they've got as well, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But the players that have been airlifted in are still going to have experience playing against tier 1, and then they can bring that down, and that overall strengthens the identity of tier 2 and will continue to close the gap. And there's been many conversations already in tier 2 about how it's the individual decision making and it's the overall macro of the teams that is the distinction between tier 1 and tier 2. The aim isn't the problem, and this Heroic core is incredibly aggressive. The T sides will be fantastic, and you've already seen sort of at Blast, like their T sides are incredible. And even losing Jota, who's now gone to Eternal Fire, who used to play under the Eternal Fire Academy, who's now come full circle there, they've still got aggressive riflers that they can slot in and make work. And yeah, I like the fact that Heroic have gone, do you know what? We will take a chance on these guys. We will put them in our team, and we will still be competing within CS. Because Heroic could have easily gone to Saw and said we can build from the ground up. But I think Saw's such an underrated coach, and the reason why the Heroic team of last year had any success anyway, I think, by and large, not only because of the players, because of the hard work Saw put in. I think if Falcons don't do well with that new lineup, then Zonic's on fraud watch, really, because it's been like 2 years now. What have you achieved? So I think Saw is so good that he's going to only develop these players even more.
There's so much I want to unpack here, but we'll go into the Saw conversation because so Zonic, major winner, Astralis and Vitality, up in the best coaches of all time, and then like you said, goes to Falcons and it doesn't work out. There is a belief for many people who watch traditional sports, and I think that the same applies to Counter-Strike, is that some coaches are fantastic at managing star players. So give them a bunch of star players or really top tier players who are experienced, who know their job, and they can manage them. You see it in football all the time. And I think Zonic is very good at that. I think that there is a skill, though, that is where Saw flourishes and where I think Zonic is struggling with Falcons in building a lineup. It's in saying, okay, you know what? Here's a mix of good players and young players, and if we put them together and we make it work like this, we can get the best results. Saw proved that with that Ents lineup when he was with Snappy, right? The team that he put together was incredible. They did incredible things. That core went to Falcons. Zonic couldn't get the same thing out of them at all. He then was stuck with the Heroic he had last year, and I say stuck because it was a little bit of a like Heroic had been picked apart, and what he put together there, they did really well. Look at them. They made the playoffs of the major. They looked really impressive. They had so much bad luck through the year with like the visa issues and whatever.
Yeah.
But they came into the major and we all went, oh shit, this team is good. And now has he done it again? Let's talk about that really quickly before we get into the players that we want to look at. First event at the box was Blast Bounty. We see Heroic make playoffs. People were really excited, and most people had written this team off before they even started. I think a lot of people went, "Oh, yeah, Heroic just got this core. SunPayus is great, but there's nothing much going on here." And then they came into Blast Bunny, and they looked really good. D-Dog.
Yeah, they did, and the thing is though, it's no surprise if you watch tier 2. Like it's no surprise that SANGAL core did well. The only conversation I sort of had was how SunPayus going to fit in, because profile-wise, he's a very different AWPer to Samay, and he, the way that SANGAL operated a lot last year was that Samay, who used to be incredibly aggressive, and now he's finding that again. The reason why I bring that up is because on SANGAL he wasn't. He was a lot more supportive, because your riflers of xFloud and Jota, they can just create you entries instantaneously. And it's one of those where it's like, okay, that means that the AWPer isn't necessarily needed so much. And this is why I actually think this is a really good move for SunPayus, because we know what SunPayus can deliver, but I think towards the tail end, psychologically, his confidence took a massive knock being in that Falcons team. And obviously then he got benched and he just wasn't playing for a few months. By him being required to step up when it matters, but also not having all of the pressure put on him in the opening stages of rounds, because you still got this firepower that can open you rounds quite a lot. That will give him time to feel gelled in the roster, will build his confidence up, and then they can start incorporating these plays a lot more. I think it's very deliberate that they went for SunPayus, not only because he's a good one in the market, and also it's almost like you scratch my back heroic and we'll take your core, we'll scratch yours, we'll give you SunPayus, who we've got on the bench anyway, who I think it was unfairly benched as well. I know his performances weren't incredible, but he was doing fine. He was doing fine.
He was like the best player on that bloody lineup
exactly.
at one point. Oh, it drove me mad.
That team sucked, right? But like, you've got his confidence knocked, I think, and then he can be now more integrated back to playing again, back to regular scrimming, back to regular practice, and then he can still deliver the aggressive stuff. And his clutching, some of his clutching during that Blast event was brilliant. His trading was really good at that event, and then he had these AWP highlights that reminded you who SunPayus was, why he broke out onto the scene, why so many teams wanted his signature. So, I think that the AWPing profiling is really good, because it does give LNZ more options in the future, we saw down the line. I also think that the conversation of the coaches is just interesting, because Jumpy was the coach before, and he was coaching SANGAL. I'm not 100% sure how involved Jumpy was in terms of the strategy and the analyst work, but what I do know is that Saw will be heavily involved. And what that means is you've got two brains like working together, sort of trying to get the ideas going. And then you've got just the experience that Saw has. I think tenfold will improve that. Jumpy had an incredible pro career, and he coached some of the best lineups towards the back end of Go, sure. But I think recency bias, Saw will elevate this team because he's been doing it on a consistent basis wherever he's gone. And I think that's the most underrated signing, actually, of Heroic's entire build in the last 2 years, actually getting Saw pen to paper, signing a long deal, because he's been phenomenal.
I hadn't thought of it like that, though. So I like the idea of building a team from the ground up, but I also do kind of like the idea that if you are a team in tier 2 and you are performing and you're getting the results, that your core can be picked up, like we've now seen with SANGAL, and you can end up together, because one, it's far quicker to integrate. So now you've got SunPayus, who's super experienced. You can integrate him into a team pretty quickly. He's done it enough times to know how to adjust, right? But your core is already communicating with each other, and now all you've done is given them an injection of resources. Let's be honest. You've got Saw, who's far more experienced, who knows how to work with this lineup, who knows SunPayus really well, so it's easy for him to integrate him. But you've also got the access of what you get when you sign to an org like Heroic, which is all those resources behind the scenes to speed you up really quickly. Obviously, it doesn't always work. We saw that with Falcons last year. You can bring the core in, but it might fail. But in this case, it is working really well. And on the plus side, I've become a bit obsessed with like the business of Counter-Strike in the last few weeks. So I keep bringing this up, and I apologize. If you watch a lot of my shows, you'll see this. Financially, Heroic has made some genius moves. Like from a financial point of view, this team is doing well. Most people say they don't make money from CS. Pretty sure they've made some pretty good cash in the last 2 years. What they sold those 2 players to Astralis for stupid money. They sold let's be honest, that Falcons buy was, I don't know, maybe
it would have been a lot of money. It would have been a lot of money.
It would have been a pretty desperate buy as well. It's one of those situations where you're like, this will be good for us.
Nuts to liquid, that would have been a lot of money.
So Nerds to Liquid, your core to Falcons, and then in that mix you got SunPayus and Madden for your bench. I was like, damn,
Yeah.
Heroic's business strategy is
And you got
we're
shushed
gonna
onto
take
NIP as well, right? That's another one. So it's all 5 being picked apart and gone away. But what you've done is you've reinvested into that tier 2 core, and you've brought something up that I completely overlooked just now because I was just trying to get everything down. But I didn't even mention it yet. But yeah, SunPayus has played with Saw under the leadership. Also, what you got to bear in mind is when Nertz came to Heroic, how good did he look? He looked brilliant, and that's because I think Saw knows how to get the best out of him. Saw knows how to get the best out of SunPayus. Like, it feels like a perfect match here. And I think
all I'm
SunPayus
saying
was.
is
I think they were trying to get SunPayus as well. I think they were trying to get him before he went Falcons.
all I'm saying is maybe if your coach had been different at Falcons a year ago, this might have maybe when you picked up the whole end score, you should have taken the coach. But anyway, but that's coulda, shoulda, woulda. They were, my understanding was, and again, this is all just rumor, but Heroic did try to get that original end score, if I'm not mistaken. Like, I think that they were going to pull all of them except Snappy. Like, my understanding was there was a full-on conversation. So they have been waiting for SunPayus. It obviously works. We've spoken now about Heroic. We've spoken about the move that they've made. We've had a chance to see them at Blast. None of the players we've mentioned are the players we want to talk about today, B-Dog.
Yeah, but that's fun.
Who is the 5th? Tell us about the 5th. Tell us why he's the focus. What is he bringing to the table?
Well, here's the fun part. Who is the 5th? Really? Because it
Fair
could
point,
be
actually.
it could be Tanir. It could be Nilo. It could be Madden. Like, we don't know. The thing is, what's really interesting is every single one of those players has got pretty much the same profile, and that is these players were built. Oh, sorry, they were built. They were brought in to replace Jota, and Jota's sort of profile was hardcore entry on T side, and also there'd be some weird periods where he'd lurk. It looked like at Blast it was Tanir and xCloud that were doing most of that. The Tanir signing for me came way out of left field, but actually when you take a step back and obviously you see the recent announcements for Heroic and they spoke about Nilo and he needed a little bit more time, it makes sense that they went in for a guy like Tanir, but they've even got Madden just in case. And I suppose that's why they got Madden, because they were worried about visa issues potentially for Tanir. And obviously, again, maybe it's just included in part of the business side of the deal with the core going to Falcons. You get Madden, you get access to Madden, and he's available. You get SunPayus as well. But yeah, basically they needed another entry player because the way the SANGAL team got a lot of success in tier 2 was from xCloud and Jota basically tearing open bomb sites, and it's a hard sort of role to find because in tier 2 you've got a lot of aggressive profiles, but at the same time you need to have balance. You need to have players that can be good at opening, but that then breaks down. And I think the HLTV adaptation of the stats, where they updated it over a few months ago, I think it does a really good job at actually breaking down the strengths and weaknesses of each player, because entry in as a framework is good, but it's also how many times do you go for the opening kill? How many times are you successful getting the opening kill? How good is your trading if you're not the first one in, but you're in that pack of players that is executing into the site? And if needed, if you've got the utility, how good are you in that respect as well? And for Heroic, and I imagine for Saw as well, it needs to be an overall balance of these things. I mean, for Jota, he was good at going for entries on SANGAL, but it was more he was their trader. Like, he wasn't going for the opening pick all the time, but he was that second guy in. xCloud and Jota. xCloud goes in first, Jota goes behind him. Jota gets the trade. It's 72 out of 100 on HLTV, which is a lot. And so you go for Tanir. Tanir, background on this guy, he used to play for Fours back in the day, and he was the Fours outfit. That whole roster was kind of hung out to dry for a while. I don't really know what happened with that org, but it felt like they had a really good thing going. They had Shalfi, who, again, a really aggressive player that actually moved over to in-game leading. Then they recruited some more talent from their region. They brought tn1R in, and tn1R and Shalfi duo was really cool. They were creating a lot of moments, but they never actually hit their heights. And I think the players around them were a little bit middling. It felt like they didn't really have the resources, and it's quite clear they didn't have the resources because now Fours, I don't really know what Fours are doing anymore. But Shalfi's got 9 pandas anyway. Won't talk about 9 pandas. And tn1R went to Gun 5, and it's either Gun 5 or Guns. Tier 2 casters, we are unanimously split whether it's Guns or Gun 5. I say Gun 5, it doesn't matter. But that team is funded by a streamer called Booster, and he basically just created his own esport team. So Gun 5 is owned by that guy. They played a lot in Tier 2. They won famously the CCT over Furia 4 months ago. tn1R was part of that lineup. And he's a very hard entry player, but his stats are better than Jota, but also Jota was playing against like Tier 1 opposition. So again, you got to consider that. But I've watched voice comms from Heroic, and I don't know how much of a point this is, but I'm just going to raise it anyway. tn1R's vibes are immaculate in this team. And obviously he's got to sort of have that energy, and he's going to make the most of his opportunity. But if vibes are good as well, that's another component of how well do you fit into the team. Because if it's not going well, and then you start tilting, like, that's not a good look for you. But yeah, tn1R, I think he's a very good pickup. I think he's a very smart pickup, actually, for Heroic. I don't know what the outlook is for him in terms of what Heroic want, whether he's going to be permanent or temporary. I think it's good that they've said in their statement that Nilo has to work to get his opportunity back. It's not just a tn1R, you're on a timer sort of thing. So I've rambled a lot, but basically the TLDR from this, if you skip ahead, is tn1R much better at entrying at a Tier 2 level than Jota is right now, but he's on Eternal Fire. His clutching is a lot better. His trading is very much the same. So overall, he's got a wider distribution of stats, which is why I think they picked him up.
So obviously right now, I'm going to base this on what Heroic has said publicly. The 5-man lineup includes tn1R. He is the 5th. Nilo and Madden are in reserve. Obviously, he's from Belarus. There were some issues with visas getting to Blast, very short notice. We saw it there was issues with Spirit as well. I think the coach was ill, actually. Let me rephrase that. But there was a chance he didn't play, therefore we got to see Madden. But right now, it isn't this weird, because I did see some of the chatter online, and I wanted to clarify that when people were like, oh, they've got these 3 players rotating. That's not what's happening. They've named their 5. They've just got 2 sitting in reserve should they need them. And after what happened with Dexter last year, I'm not surprised that they set up a situation where they know that they can have someone to fill in where need be. But he is the 5th, probably in that lineup. I mean, you mentioned there that he played on 4s, but a lot of the other teams he played on not really that well known. So would you say out of the core 5 there, B-Dog, he is the least experienced, I suppose, when it comes to playing the bigger tournaments? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's fair. I think so. I think we'll talk about Nilo, but like he's thrown in the same category there as well. And I mean, even the most experienced guy on the team is SunPayus. Like, I mean, xCloud played a bit on Eternal Fire, but LNZ, xCloud Youngster, they went to the RMRs, they went to Pro League. Like, they're the big lands that this team went to. So, yeah, I'd say inexperienced at LAN. Online, very experienced. These guys play like every day, like 2 officials a day. So they know what it takes. I don't know how the VRS works in terms of when it resets, when it updates. But if they need to go and grind online, they'll do very, very well. So I wouldn't worry about that.
It's also like, again, back to the business side of it, which is going to bore everyone. Just leave me. This is my entertainment for a month or 2. Very smart, because so obviously you've got tn1R comes in less experienced, you can build him up. You've got Nilo in the wings, less experienced, you can build him up. You've got Madden, who could be in high demand. You've just created yourself. and he's experienced. So now you've created yourself a situation where should a tier 2 team see themselves moving fast up the ranking and realizing they need a little bit more firepower, you have the option to sell them a Madden and say, hey, you want some experience? You want some firepower? We got a guy for you. Or, hey, you guys need we've got 3 players that we could actually sell off if need be, right? You've kind of kept yourself some spares. It's a very clever way to just, make some cash. I don't know if Heroic's thinking like this. I'm thinking like this because I've just sort of looked at the money side of it.
I never thought I'd see squad depth in Counter-Strike teams, but we've got it.
But it is what it is. I feel like they probably, again, I have no insight. They probably got Madden as like an extra throw-in because
that's what I'm saying.
Just trying to offload. So it was like, we'll just take him. This is a curious one for me. So Nilo now is on the bench, and obviously now there was this issue where they needed a sub to step in for the LAN part of Bounty. Madden's going to do it, and then there's this release about Nilo took some time off. So now, this was the one thing I didn't like, B-Dog, that he needs to earn his spot back. But I was like, you initially announced him as a reserve. So what spot is there number 1 reserve and number 2 reserve? Is that what that was?
I imagine it was supposed to be Nilo, and then they got tn1R because Nilo wasn't ready. And then I don't actually hate that in the statement, because what you're then doing is giving security to tn1R publicly that, hey, we're not just going to drop you at an instant Nilo is ready. So I don't completely hate it, to be honest, but from what I derived from that, and from my own personal eye test, I don't know how much weight that holds, but from my eye test, I think Nilo's a better player than tn1R. So I would imagine he would have been the 5th, and I imagine that, yeah, he was supposed to be, he couldn't do it. They then got tn1R. I think that because the tn1R was so far out of left field, I imagine that was a decision made pretty quick. And it still fits the thing is, it fits the profile of the player that Nilo is in a way, because tn1R, very young guy, same as Nilo, feels the same role as Nilo. It's clear they didn't want to go with Madden, because why would they have gone for tn1R? So it's the thing is, Heroic's core system, and it's the same with the old Ents team as well. And I guess the philosophy of Saw as a coach is, you can see these players in tier 2, tier 3. You can grab them and you can develop them. And that's kind of the direction I would assume that he wanted to go in, rather than, again, having this, I'd say, risk in a loose sense. Because sure, Madden, again, coached under Saw, but you've got a risk of the core not gelling well with 2 players that have previously played together. I imagine their motivation's good as well, but you don't know whether immediately, if they don't hit the ground running, will this team stagnate? Will it create a bad environment just because of the previous experiences that you've had? I don't know personally. I'm not trying to throw anyone under the bus. I'm not trying to say there would be a toxic atmosphere or whatever, but I imagine that because the tn1R signing was so like, wow, like, really? Okay. And then you've also got Nilo on the bench, that he fits exactly the same profile Nilo does, so that's why he's in here now. And yeah, I don't mind the statement, because you are giving security to tn1R, and the fact that he's then had to miss a LAN because of visa issues, and then you put out that statement, you're not saying it doesn't matter about your visa problems. Like, we dealt with visa problems all last year. Like, your space on the team is safe, and as long as you work hard, there is a spot for you. Like, that, for me, that was a good thing.
The fact that there's like an interchangeability between Nilo and tn1R is really interesting. I would love to know who's responsible for the scouting for Heroic, if it is just Saw or if they have someone else involved. If you know, or if you're from Heroic watching this, tell us. Please will you let us know who came up with this plan and who's been scouting.
Sneaky beaky, tell us, please.
I suppose we used to, we were all working in the same vibe, Brent. Give us some insights. But let's talk about Nilo, though, because obviously young Swedish player worked his way through Noob Academy, had one of those, I suppose Sweden used to be renowned, right, for producing just the best Counter-Strike talent ever. They have a lot of these young guns who I think are exciting to watch. Would you put Nilo into that category? Is he one of those Swedish players we need to keep an eye on?
Yeah, absolutely. I was really excited, actually, when they announced that he was going to be on that roster in some way. And the rumors I heard behind, like, just rumblings in the community, was that he was supposed to be signed as the 5th. So when I heard that, I was like, that's really cool, because Nilo, he's been around the tier 2 space for 3-4 years. Like he was under
He's only
NIP.
20.
I know, but he was under NIP for a while. Yeah, NIP 2021 for Young Ninjas. Then he had like a year off, and then he played there again for another year, and then he went to Metasport for the best part of two and a bit years. So no, 1.5 years. So he's a really exciting player. One of my friends, like 2 years ago, said Nilo is my favorite Counter-Strike pro, and I was like, that's a crazy statement to make. He's like 17. What? But he's so good. Like I feel like he does a lot of underrated things. His entry and stats. I mean, if you go on you go on the 2.1 statistics, I mean, it tells you all for you, right? Entry in 78, firepower 97. But what's awesome is everything is consistent on this profile, bar utility. Utility is a little bit weaker, but that's because his entry stat's very high, which means he's the one going in first, so he's not going to be the one throwing utility. That's where him and tn1R, their profiles are slightly different, because tn1R goes for slightly less, so he fits more of the Jota 1-for-1 mold, but his utility is way higher. His utility usage to support the team is pretty damn good as well. So in terms of a player to watch, Nilo definitely is one. We've known about Nilo. If you're a tier 2 enjoyer, you would know about Nilo. We always get excited when we watch him because he just does audacious things. He's definitely one to watch, and hopefully his personal situation, everything, firstly, is okay. I hope that he's fine. But when he comes back to competition, and once he earns his way into this heroic team, if we see him in this heroic team, that's where I start to get really excited, because I like tn1R. I think tn1R was very surprising at Blast. I think he rose to the occasion brilliantly. It's just that question of consistency. And the only question mark I have about this whole Nilo thing is, when he comes back, I don't want him just to sit on the bench and just kind of waste his career.
That was going to be my next question, because obviously the conversation, if you missed it, was Heroic said that Nilo was going to have to earn his spot back. He had gone through some personal things, I think that they said, and he said that he was in agreement with the statement. He knew what he had to do. But my concern is if this Heroic lineup, and I mean, first event out the gate, you make playoffs. You go down to Spirits in those playoffs. They're the best team in the world. They just won the major. You can get away with it. If they do a similar run in Cato, which is next, it's going to be pretty hard to earn that spot back. So this is my concern, B-Dog, is you're on the bench. What happens if you stay there? Then all of a sudden, the value of this player drops exponentially.
Can I say a thing that just is not backed by anything apart from gut feeling? And that
pretty
is
much all I do all the time. So
I don't. The thing is, the way I view Heroic as an organization, I don't think they'll let that happen, and I don't think that they'd just let him sit on the bench. I think probably the best move for both of them, if it came to that, would be, I guess for Heroic business-wise, it would be selling him. But I wouldn't actually hate him going on loan, right? Like that does happen. As we kind of keep drawing the football parallels, like I would imagine Heroic wouldn't want to hold him back, and he's got a lot of potential. So if tn1R gels and the team is more than happy to play with tn1R, and tn1R performs on a consistent basis, then maybe Nilo, there isn't actually a spot for him at all, and they've actually just struck lucky with having to make this tn1R sign in. But what I would say is that's the one thing that I do worry about when I look at tn1R, is just, can he do it consistently? And that's something that Nilo also needs to work on, to be fair to both of them, because in a series, Nilo can sometimes have a bad map, and then he drops like a 1.9 the next map, and it's like, okay. How is map 1 so disproportionate to the other 2 maps? And again, it's something they need to work on, and it would be unfair for me to give that critique to tn1R and not give it to Nilo, because again, the player profiles are so similar that they both affect the weaknesses are very similar. So yeah, I don't think that would happen just because Heroic as an org, I actually back them to not let a player's career just be wasted away. And also from a business point of view, it doesn't make sense to have a player on your bench you don't intend to use and just pay them a monthly salary anyway. I don't know how benching contract works, but yeah, I don't know.
It's kind of clever if they So say, for example, this heroic lineup as we see it now has a really good run at Kato, and they continue on to the major. You don't want to swap things around running into a major. So like you said, then you send Nilo off on loan. If he goes somewhere and performs really well, his stocks rise again. That business dealing is good. Now you've got two players that are worth good money if you want to sell them. But also you've got two players that you can interchange if need be. If someone comes around and they're sniffing around Tanya and they kind of want him, because I think that could happen. There is a benefit there. So smart business moves from Heroic once again. I'm just going to keep doing that and annoy everyone. I bet you like in a week's time it's going to come out that there's like some massive financial scandal with this organization and I'm going to look like a fool, but whatever, I've said it. Yeah. Let's get into the crux of the show. You need to sell me this pro. I think you've done a really good job so far. But let's start with Nilo, because I do think you've spoken very highly of him. Obviously, for me, if I were to invest, my concern would be him sitting on the bench. That would be the biggest thing, is that my investment's going to not really see much growth because of the fact that he doesn't get play time now.
Yeah, look, I think that's a valid concern, but you take a look at his career, and he's been in the game. He's had like a bit of skin in it since 2021, which means that he was like 16, turning 17, entering into the game. He's gone to LANs, and he has got that experience there, albeit not with his team all the time, like international, like IESF. Like he's had experience just playing in different countries and setups as well. Reached the grand final of the last game he ever played with Metasport, and they won it. I think it's called like Wilds or something. He dropped to 1.97 in map 2 and just destroyed his opposition. That was a reverse sweep as well. So pressure's on. He shines. His stats are incredibly consistent across the board from what you want in a player, which means he's versatile. Here in Counter-Strike, you do have role fit players, and there is obviously the role cells online that we'll talk about. We need a hard entry, we need a lurker, we need da-da-da-da-da. In Counter-Strike 2, where things are so, I'd say, volatile because it's MR12, you need players to quickly adapt and fill different molds, and Nilo can do that. And all you need to do is, if you don't believe me, the numbers back it up. His entries, he goes for a lot of entries. More often than not, he gets the opening kill. That is so valuable to put your team in a 5v4 when the max number of rounds to get to is 13, and comebacks are so frequent in Counter-Strike 2. Utility placement is a lot better than some of the other hard entries I've seen personally in Tier 2. It feels like he's very cognizant of what he wants to achieve in a round. And also, if he doesn't go in first, because he is throwing that utility, his trading is sublime. So this guy has got a lot to develop on, to be fair to him, because he's 20 years old. But if this is his baseline, and Heroic are interested in him, and they have sniped him from Metasport and picked him up with the potential intention to integrate him fully into that starting lineup, you have to trust what Saw has done and built up with these players. You also have to trust what I guess I have seen in Tier 2, which is Nilo is more than capable of hanging against the best. You look back to the Metasport games as well in Blast, and I think he did pretty okay there, as well as their first little taste into Tier 1. So I think with Nilo around the right players, he can succeed. There is a couple of question marks about, is he going to play? Also, when was the last time he played in an international team? I can't remember in 2021, to be honest, guys, whether Young Ninjas was international or not. I don't think it was, because at We Play it was all Swedish. So has he actually played on an international lineup? How would that integration work as well? So there is a couple of question marks around that, but the conversation about moving from national to international has actually fallen away a lot, right? So I wouldn't actually consider that a negative. So I think he's very good. He will provide a diverse range of options to replace Jota. When you compare Nilo and Tanir, even though Tanir played well at Blast, I'd rather have Nilo in that lineup. So that's why I would have him as a one to absolutely watch out for, and I guess invest in if he's in the starting lineup.
You mentioned that move from national to international lineups. That's my controversial opinion. In modern day Counter-Strike, if you want to be a pro player,
You got to
you
speak
have,
English and be international,
yeah,
right?
you got to be able to either speak English or Russian, and you got to be able to move around and play on international lineups. Finished.
Yeah.
Like, there's no opportunity otherwise. It's just not going to happen. Astralis can't make any more changes. They've gone through all the bloody Danish players, so like that's where we're sitting. So like, what are you going to do, right? Let's move on though to Tania, because this was like the surprise, right? Like you mentioned, lots of eyebrows raised. Wasn't I would say Nilo probably had a big footprint or profile coming into this. Would you invest in Tania? We've already seen him play in Blast for many of us who didn't watch sort of tier 2, tier 3, but for you, how do you sell him to us?
The only thing I'm gonna be here is probably a bit hypocritical, because I've just said I'd rather have Nilo than Tanir, and that is true. So now I feel like I have to almost explain why, but at the same time, I want to speak highly of him. So I'm going to try and balance it. But what Tanir gives you as a player for Heroic right now is he gives you the recency bias of playing out of his mind over the last 3 months. Like, he was really good in a Gun 5 squad that was middling at best, and he was definitely the standout player on there, and he was being consistent in a team that it felt like couldn't really play to their absolute full strength. You're going to get that with the SANGAL core because of how structured it is, and also you've got a dependable AWPer in SunPayus. What you get a lot with these tier 2 teams sometimes is you get one really good AWPer, you get one really good entry, and the rest of the core is just kind of mid. Sorry, it's just how it is. SANGAL core is not mid. SANGAL core is very good. LNZ is a very hot prospect when it comes to in-game leading, and the mistakes Tanir makes in his game sometimes, which is kind of in part bred by the lineups he's in and potentially the culture he has, it's a completely different shift. And because I've watched these comms and I'm now biased by watching a 7 minutes hand-picked edited YouTube video, it is that culture, it's kind of suits him, and it kind of looks very good for this player. He will also help you a lot in clutches, and it was Youngster and it was Tanir winning a lot of the clutches for Heroic at Blast Bounty, so he will give you that as well, which is weird for him to be a clutch player when he's also more of an entry player as well. It's like, how the hell does that work? But that must mean that he's getting the entry and he's staying alive for a long period of time. Trading, very good for a tier 2 player. As spoken about him, the thing is with him and Nilo, like the profile is just identical. Like it's so identical. I'm glad he's being given a shot. He's definitely worth keeping an eye on. I definitely think he will be part of a tier 1.5, tier 1 team within a few years, maybe. It depends how well he does, and I don't know is the true answer, but I think he's got the right team around him. I think he's got the right coach around him, and I think he's got the right sort of mindset as well, just from kind of what I know in the tier 2 space, and also the fact that if he's being so consistent on a team and he's willing to stick it out with a team for so long in Gun 5, where they beat Furia and won a CCT, but that was kind of the only thing they massively achieved, then that has to be a lot of credit to you as well for willing to stick things out and look at things on a longer term basis and have a future vision for where you want to be as a player. So I think both of these players are so similar, it makes a lot of sense why Heroic have moved for them, and either one of them will be a good fit. It's right now, for me personally, in my gut, I think Nilo brings more firepower wise, but I think Tanir, in terms of recent form, actually brings a bit more consistency wise. So it's a trade off of who you want, and of course you don't really have a choice right now. You got to play with Tanir, but I'm really glad he did well, because a lot of people should be talking about him as well. I didn't answer your question, but I tried to just give an overall view of what Tanir is and who he is, and I'm glad he did well at Blast, because I don't think people would have ever heard of him, really, if you don't watch Tier 2 before, and I'm glad he's getting a little bit of spotlight now. And also, one more thing that isn't relevant at all, he has like 200 followers on Twitter. Go and follow Tanir and look at his DM routine. bro has 5,000 kills in DM before games. Like, what are you doing? Like, what the hell?
I love that. I mean, basically what you've done is I was very excited about Heroic at the end of the Shanghai Major. Then I was very sad. You've made me very excited about this again. I am very excited about this team. I'm excited to see what they can do. And then to kind of wrap this up, because this is where we're at the end, but B-Dog, we were meant to do a wrap up of season 1.
Yeah, we should.
And then I was just really tired and I wanted to sit in the sun, and you were at the HLTV Awards, and then we never really got there. But can I just say, this is a bit of a pat on B-Dog's back, so deal with me if you're watching. You mentioned so many players last year. So we do the show, B-Dog chooses the players that we talk about. Isn't it cool that so many of the players you spoke about have found themselves in these bigger teams, have popped off, have had these like big moments? Give yourself a little pat on the back, because you were the one telling us to watch out for them, and it worked. I mean, some of them didn't, but we'll ignore those.
Yeah, that's fine. Which way? I think it would actually be really good to go through a quick, like, not now, but I think like a separate video would actually be really good to see when we spoke about them, where they were in their career and where they are now, and kind of sort of see if technically if they've advanced in their career, then it's a good investment, and if they stayed the same, it's a fine investment. If they've got worse, then it obviously wasn't great. But I think that'd actually be really interesting just to sort of see, because I know we did like quite a lot of episodes, and I know
tell
one
you what,
of them.
let's just commit to this right now. We're going to do that for our next episode. We're going to go through all the episodes we did, all the players, and I will keep a fake spreadsheet to see if I would have actually made money, if there was money to be made.
Okay.
Here.
That sounds good.
Okay, so next, we've done it, we've committed. If you're watching, next episode, we are going to go back and see where those players are now and how we've done. And we don't know when that episode will be, but it will happen.